today, America is the only health statistic we're number one in is dying slowly. We're the number one in the world in reduction of health span, which means that if the average age is 73, for the last 14 years of our lives, we slowly die. So we're spending all this money to basically suffer. That's why when I do a speech and I ask the audience, I said, put up your hand if you want to live to 150. No one puts up their hand. The number one killer of Americans over 65 is loneliness. Loneliness is curable if you can connect. You only have to have one dyadic relationship at a time.
Hey everyone, Derek Hines here. Welcome to the podcast where I'll share with you the patterns, insights, research, and technologies that we use in my own pain and performance practice to help people improve their health, speed their healing, and increase their longevity. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. All right, Blair LaCorte, welcome to the Pain and Performance Podcast, my man.
Hey, thank you.
I'm excited that this is kind of an embarrassment of riches for me to kind of go. There's so much that we can extract from you. But before we started, we were kind of talking about kind of something that we've been talking a lot about on the podcast, which is kind of the changes in longevity and what that means for healthcare. And this is something that you are deeply intertwined with. So let's start right there.
Sure. And listen, I want to apologize to your users for the video. It looks like it's dark and stormy here, but I'm actually down in Santa Monica, and I'm looking out the window. It's turning into a great day, just early. So, I also appreciate you having me on. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of two things. One is that life is really about people and patterns, and that you don't have life unless you focus on it. And, for me, longevity is just part of how you live your life. And so in the last year, I have completely focused on how can I actually change my life, and then how can I take some of what I'm learning and get it out there. The big win for me is that I get to do what I love. So I'm the vice chair right now of a institution called the Buck Institute. So you guys can Google it and take a look at it. Many of you probably have not heard of it. It's the most famous institution on longevity, but it's really a scientist institution. So the website is pretty deep, but you may recognize some of the things that we've invented. We discovered autophagy, which is calorie restriction. We discovered ketosis. As you guys know, with the keto diet, we discovered senescence. Almost all of geroscience for the past 30 years has been either led or coordinated by the scientists of the Buck, and I'm humbled to be a part of it. I'm not a scientist or a doctor. I do play one on TV or on a podcast. But I do have access to some of the best information out there. So I'm gonna try to take you through what I know. And as I always say, I don't have to be exactly right. I just have to get it right. And if there's anything that I spark in anyone, and you want to send me a note and either correct me or enhance me or give me some feedback so I can share that with the next group of people, completely open. At the end, I'll give you my my LinkedIn. So there's my warm up.
This might be a weird place for us to immediately go off the bat, but you were talking about how you started to kind of change based on some of the stuff that you've learned. You're in kind of this interesting space where you've been deep in business, and probably getting a lot of the information of longevity as you've been involved with Buck. I find that business owners have one of the people, not just business owners. I think anybody who's high level business, certainly in entrepreneurship, have one of the hardest times achieving overall health, because they have that area of their life that they almost kind of put on hold. Like, I'll mess with that later. I've got this focus that I'm working on. Was that something that was a challenge for you to kind of shift gears and go back to like, oh wait, I'm talking about this, I'm learning it, I need to implement some of this stuff in my life?
Right. Well, look, it's the fact is business is just a sport, right? And sports are great because the rules. At least some of the time, the rules. You know what you want to achieve. and you can make progress every day. And so for a lot of us, let's get out there and play, and let's play as hard as we can. The problem is there isn't someone out there that stops and says, "Hey, listen, you're becoming unbalanced." So work is relentless. It's as relentless as you want it to be, and the softer sense of taking care of ourselves and self care. Unless your mother's calling you up, and even if she is, sometimes you just smile. You're not thinking about it. And the problem is that our society and our healthcare system in the United States is not set up to force us to be self-aware. And again, this is a cliche, but I know there's a lot of people out there who are in on your podcast in functional medicine and different areas of physical therapy. And look, we wait till things break. That's the way that we function. And so if you're in business and you haven't broken yet, you figure, hey, I can pull an all nighter today. It's just one more day. I can get this done because I can see the results on the scorecard. I can see what I do. And the problem is you're not seeing the negatives on the scorecard. You're not seeing the reduction in how close you are to the edge. And again, you could say, hey, listen, that's great. Great athletes push themselves to the edge, and then we fix ourselves when we're broken and we get up. And that's just not the way it works. The second that you end up with an intervention into your system, and I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what I believe is the system dynamics of health and system biology of health. The second we interject a drug or a fix or an operation, we forever change our ability to cure ourselves in the same way we did before. And that's the problem, is it's not, we don't think about it. We think it's actually a fix, and in reality, it's a Band-Aid that has a cost. So not only do we not know that we're wearing down, when we fix it, we don't realize we're damaging the system. The number one cause of aging and illness is misfire in your immune system and chronic inflammation. Well, chronic inflammation is caused because you hurt yourself and then you continued to have your immune system work on that beyond the level it should have, and therefore it's a cavalcade. So I think your point's exactly right, is that it's very obvious on the scorecard what's happening in business, but we need to be more self-aware of ourselves.
Yeah, you said, like, being self-aware. It's so we can be. That's very easy, I think, when you're looking at the bank account at the end of the month. It's we've almost done the opposite in healthcare, like at least on the societal level, where like we've actually tried to help people ignore the scorecard more and more and more. Like, if your body's sending you a pain signal of inflammation, what is mainstream media telling people? It's like, just take this pill and it'll cover up that alarm, and we'll turn that off. Like, don't listen to that stuff. And like, we see it all the time. People, we are really good at ignoring our bodies these days until, like you said, you can't anymore. And then that means something's broken. You can't function anymore. And your body's like, look, I've been telling you this for 2 years that there was something wrong here. You've just kept ignoring the signals.
Right. And, I think, look, I would always say, my dad had a saying, he said, look, everyone's biggest strength is always their biggest weakness. And our biggest strength as humans is that we can overcome and conceptualize, and that we can imagine. We're the only animals in the world that actually can imagine things. Everyone else, it's true physicality and where you are and what you're doing in your relationship. And so we can actually create an alternate reality, to your point, where yeah, the reality is I'm in pain. Now, there's also a hubris to believe that we can cure things better than nature, and nature is our body. And so let's just take a pill to do that. The reality is that we were designed to, in most part, cure ourselves by having our body do it, and that our body lives on what we feed it, how we move it, how we maintain it, and the environment we let it sit in. And when we ignore those things, our body has a difficult time doing it alone. So I think I look at part of this as we focus on sick care is because we believe that we can do better than nature.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I had a patient come in last week who we were talking about, kind of overall health, and we're going through kind of some of her metrics. And one of the things that came up was she was pre-diabetic. And I was like, okay, so like, what's the game plan? What did your doctor tell you? She said, nothing. We're going to go back. They couldn't put me on medicine because insurance wouldn't pay for it yet.
Right.
So they said, come back in 6 months and we'll retest you. And if at that point you're diabetic, look, we can get into like how this should be practiced, but this is more, kind of, I guess, an example of the overall system that does happen this way. Like, let's just wait to see if this gets worse. And if it gets worse, here's the pill that will give you that will fix the problem, so to speak. And so, of course, we've got to take a step back and have this conversation. But
Right. But
like,
that
there's
you
so
think
many
about
areas of healthcare like that.
I think how crazy that is. It's a rule of thumb, right? Number one, we don't know whether she's pre-diabetic or she's diabetic because we don't understand her system. So just saying you're under 100 or over 100 or you're under 120 or you're over 120 is a rule of thumb. And what we can prove, because we've done a bunch of big studies on it, back in 1972, they did this study. They wanted to actually do a contest, and they wanted to find the most normal person in America by health and by looks and things like that. And at the end of the day, they found out there is no one, right? Because that's just an average, and there's no one that fits all of those normal metrics at the same time. So they're telling to them your cholesterol's too, at this level, and that's good. It's okay. You're below average or you're above average. Really doesn't matter. What matters is an N of one, which means that you are unique and the way your body works is unique, which is why when someone comes in and says, I feel off, but there's really nothing, in my blood work right now, you got to pay attention to it because the only person who can tell whether your body is out of balance is you. But we've been, to your point, trained to ignore, tough it out until we break. And then don't worry, we can come back in, whether it's a drug or it's a surgery, and we can fix it. So the pre-diabetic thing is craziness because also
Well,
pre-diabetics is the number one, cause of aging is chronic inflammation and aging related diseases. And they're all inflammation based diseases caused by glucose absorption. So when you think about it, if I said one thing to you and I said, if you wanted to get a sense of your health and you couldn't pick a single metric, what metric would you pick? You would look at the amount of inflammation in your body because no matter what metric is off, it's going to show up because your body is struggling, right? And again, diabetes, is one of those six chronic inflammation illnesses that's a canary in the coal mine.
yeah, yeah. When we start looking like forward from this, we're having these conversations every day with our patients, and I think it's almost like people have to go back and reprogram how we're thinking about this stuff because for whatever it is, let's say the last 100 years, we've been in this like reactive medicine, this sick care medicine where it's like wait until it happens and then let's come behind and fix it. Whereas if you look at us actually getting healthier in the future, it's going to shift to where we're going away from sick care and we're going towards like, let's keep you healthy, which means we need to be ahead of these things. It kind of goes to like, hey, let's check your inflammation while you're feeling good and make sure that everything inside is working. What's your thoughts on that one? But also, if you have like, what's the path to that?
Right. So look, I love this conversation because what you're really talking about is change management and how we all think differently. And I can tell you my story of how I started to think differently about this, but it doesn't happen overnight. And let me also say that, I've restructured 8 companies. And every time I go into a company, everyone says, oh my God, the company's in trouble. They're all idiots. And the reality is they're usually not, right? There's something happened in the environment. Something happened with someone people in the company. Something happened with the business model. And so you have to actually ask yourself what happened before you can look at what the cure is. And so we are awesome. We actually, as humans, had a bunch of things that were happening to us. And, we invented technology, animals were eating us, and, we invented fire and heat and things like that. And then we would die sometimes mysteriously, and we would pray, to a higher power and say, help me. And so we used what we had, which is our brains, to invent penicillin and antibiotics, and we figured out how to do surgery. And we thought, oh, this is beautiful. I have been given the God-given ability to take some of this randomness out of life. And that was all good, except that humans have a tendency to then take it too far. And so, to your point, what was a good evolution in our ability to take randomness out of our lives has actually turned into the only thing we do, which is we've now decided we actually can cure anything. So why worry about how we balance everything? So I would say that the hardest thing right now is that when you treat illness at sickness, it's the highest cost, lowest probability of getting results. Okay, so by the time your doctor gets you and you have a stage 1 cancer, it is very, very bad, right? Not that we couldn't cure it, but we are going to use something like chemo and burn the heck out of your body, and we're going to do damage to kick save. It's much better to have run a defense that didn't allow it to start. And that's where you get into this predict and prevent. So, what I try to tell people is that, look, let's look at ourselves as either a restructuring or a growth company. And they're basically the same thing. A restructuring says we've gotten to a point in time, we need to do things differently. A growth company says we've taken it as far as we can, but I want to double. I want to be better, and I need to change everything. So if you look at it that way, it's a very positive. We can decide to take ourselves to a new level. It doesn't always have to be because we're in trouble to do that. It means that we just want to be better. And the healthcare in the future, we're going to have to drive it because the system is actually set up, and it's going to take a while to change. So if we don't interject ourselves into it, when you get cancer, you learn everything there is about cancer, and you go to your doctor and you go to a specialist, and that doctor, you talk and you think and you make things happen, and you look at your system and you look at patterns. We should be doing the same things when we're healthy, right? But the problem is we don't talk to our doctors. We don't talk to basically our doctors, our trainer or our coach, but they are not the athlete, right? When you look at athletes who want to get better on performance every day, they're not taking all of their feedback from their doctor. They're talking to people and psychologists and trainers and you know weight consultants and things like that. They're doing things before they're going to go talk to their doctor to get their physical. And so that's the mindset change, is that we wake up today and we think, you got 3 billion cellular transactions in your brain every second. We have no friggin' idea how our body works. Thank God. It's unbelievably complicated. We still don't understand how birth happens. We're having a very difficult time understanding, a bunch of how the systems work together. But we do know that if we're good to it, it can give us signals and signs on what it wants to be and where it is. So that's my attitude is, I wake up every day and I ask myself, okay, how do I feel? What am I doing? And what am I testing? And if I have a bad day and I eat a sundae and I feel bad the next day, then I make a decision. Was it worth it or was it not worth it? Did I have a couple of drinks? Maybe it was worth it. Maybe it wasn't worth it. And we can talk. I have, what I've put together is a bunch of cheat sheets, which is, 10 things that you could do to add 10 healthy years to your life, or 7 tests that you could do to decrease the chances that you'll accidentally find out you're going to die. Right. And so I dumb it down. Right. And then I start to work it from there. And then I get more complex as I get better at the first 10 things.
Yeah, I like that. We'll have to steal a few of those ideas from you. Um, right now, the person has to be driving this in a lot of ways, right? The system around this is set up in a way currently where the more people that are sick or have health issues, the more money that goes into the healthcare system, the more almost kind of funny. Almost everyone around the healthcare system makes more money. In the more sick people we have. So if we
It,
start
it's
kind of
it's very true, but it's not because there's evilness or it's conspiracy theory. We are drawn towards ways that capitalism is drawn towards ways it makes money, and right now there's a way to make money, and there's a way to make money. And again, full disclosure, I've owned two dieting companies in my lifetime. One was we a bunch of friends who bought Nutrisystem in the old days, very successful, right? And also iTrim. And when you look at it, diets are awesome because when the person fails, they blame themselves, not the diet, and they'll be back in 18 months. Okay, people make money off of selling diets. Full disclosure, I still am a big investor. We run 1,800 gyms. Okay. Some of the most successful gyms out there are the ones who charge you $10 a month and you don't come in, but it's too little to carry your credit card because the cognitive dissonance of you saying you're quitting your gym is actually more difficult than paying the $10 a month and saying, don't worry, I'm going to get there next month. So we have systems in capitalism that provide products to people because people want them and will pay money for them, right? When I was at my private equity firm, we owned Burger King. Okay, when we went and took over Burger King, we bought it and we looked at it. The average person that went to Burger King was not McDonald's. They were an 18 to 25-year-old male that had a psychographic we called the fan. They watched sports every day. They went to a fast food restaurant every day, and we weren't changing their mind. They were 18 to 25-year-old males, and they weren't going to die. What they wanted was more salt on the fries, more caffeine in the soft drink, and they wanted the drive-through to be 30 seconds faster because they didn't come in, right? There are people out there that are paying for things, and then there are companies out there that are going to provide it. So at the end of the day, I can't get upset at capitalism. Capitalism is giving people what they want. Now, I can say that there are leaders out there that can give people something that they want that's better for them. But here's, I always like, let's go back. We're restructuring a company, and it's called the American healthcare system. Let's actually first take a pulse of why we're here. We're 39th in the world in longevity, okay, which means we're behind Cuba. Okay, we're behind Cuba in longevity, although we pay 10 times more in healthcare costs than anyone else in the world. And 83% of our healthcare spend is spent in the last year of your life. Okay, and if you look at the worst statistic in the world is health span, which means the time that you're living that you're actually healthy. Now, we always talk about these 100th of 1%. We can find them whose immune system repurposes themselves. I have a video of a woman drinking a shot, smoking a cigarette, and she's talking to one of our doctors, and they said, you know what? We could give you a couple more years if adapt your behavior. And she said, son, how about live my last four doctors? So I think I'm okay, right? And the reality is her immune system is impervious. And what happens to those superagers is they live to the mid 90s and they only die in the last year. So their health doesn't deteriorate. They don't get dementia. They fall down and then within a year and a half, they're dead. That's the way you want to live your life. You want to optimize living, not dying. Today, America is the only health statistic we're number one in is dying slowly. We're the number one in the world in reduction of health span, which means that if the average age is 73, for the last 14 years of our lives, we slowly die. And it's defined by chronic illnesses. By the time we're the average American 65, they have two chronic illnesses, inflammation based, whether that's arthritis or it's dementia or it's heart disease or any of these things. We're just dying slowly. So we're spending all this money to basically suffer. That's why when I do a speech and I ask the audience, I said, put up your hand if you want to live to 150. No one puts up their hand. I
right.
say, put up your hand if you want to live to 150 at the health you were at 40. Everyone puts up their hand. So right now, the big issue we have, even beyond longevity, is really health span. Is if you're going to die, we're all going to die. Death is undefeated. But if you, how do you optimize both net joy and net health? And that's really what my passion is because that is actually configurable. So we now know we have a problem in health span. I'll say one more thing, is that you always ask, how did the company get here? Why are we so different? Why did we get to be the worst in the world in health span? And so there's a bunch of factors. but I'm a redneck from Maine, so I have to bring it down to just a couple. Number one reason that we have lower health span than anyone in the world is because we hate Russia. Okay, it's very simple. In 1950, after World War II, we decided that Russia was our enemy, and that if we looked at the system we set up, which the monetary system, the UN, the IMF, the USAID, we decided that in order to make friends in the world, we had to use food. So the Department of Agriculture went out and said to the farmers in America, we need to grow more food. And so we increased within the next 10 years, 500% our production of wheat, soy, and corn, and we shipped it around the world. But there tends to be a capitalist sense that this is awesome. We got these big farms, we're making a lot of food. Why don't we sell more to US as well? And so, by an unintended consequence of hating Russia, our calorie intake went from 2,800, actually, it was at 2,200 when, back in 1900, and then it went to 3,200. So, we increased calorie intake by one third over a 10-year period into a population of rats, right? Which was the United States. And we said, by the way, it's all carbohydrates. So number one, we're eating more. I told you we, did the basic research on autophagy. If you take your calorie intake down to 600 calories, you will actually live 10 years longer. Now, you'll hate your life and you wish you were dead, but you can live 10 years longer. And the reason is autophagy brings all the energy to the center of the cell because we've lived in starvation for 2,000 years. And so when you do that, the outside of the cell doesn't get as much energy. And so a lot of the misreplications in cancers and a lot of the viruses die, right? So you can live longer if you starve yourself. Now, I'm not saying we should do that. What I'm saying is we did the opposite. We fed these rats, and the rats are US. The second thing that happened was in the early 80s, it started the big push for, whether it was going to be fat or whether it was going to be sugar, one. And the sugar lobby ended up being smarter. And the sugar lobby got the fact that sugar wasn't calories and that, and how it was actually put in and that was bad. And so we started to go non fat in the early 80s. Well, let me tell you the problem. Fat isn't bad for you, and it's not what makes you fat. It just sounds good when you say fat makes you fat, right? But sugar is insidious, okay, for a bunch of reasons. And one of the reasons is because the biggest issue with your immune system is glucose absorption. So putting sugar into your system is not a good thing because it breaks down your immune system. But more important than that, what happened is that when you take fat out of food, it doesn't taste good. So if you're selling food, that's not happy for you that your food doesn't taste good. So 83% of processed food now includes injected sugar. So when you buy a steak, and it's prepackaged and it's, one of those, steaks you chop up and make into a cheesesteak that's processed, it's got sugar in it. It all has sugar in it. So when you combine increasing our calories by one third and putting sugar into everything you eat, you have taken your system and you have actually made your immune system struggle. And that's why we're struggling with these chronic diseases. All of those diseases, what we've proved at the Buck is that arthritis and Alzheimer's are related. We used to argue, is it inflammation? Does sickness cause inflammation or does inflammation cause sickness? It's both. Yes, when you get sick, inflammation comes in, but chronic inflammation causes sickness when it doesn't clear. And how do you get chronic inflammation? You eat too much and you inject sugar so that it continues on. The number one, anyway, I'm off on my passionate thing, but this is much simpler than you think. And this is why when we can't get too confused by all the hype out there about what it is to be healthy. What it is to be healthy is very simple. It's bringing down inflammation in your body. And so stop getting confused. And I can tell you a bunch of different things that will do that, but certain things work better for certain people. The keto diet does not work for everybody. In fact, I can tell you in a genetic test whether it's probably going to work for you. If I combine a genetic test with a mouth and a stomach biome, I can tell you for sure what's going to work for you. If I combine that with biomarkers in your blood over time, you can actually create what we'll call an N of one. a personalized view of your body over time that will show you what's working for you and what's not, right? Three simple gauges of your base genetics, which is just the notes in the song. 93% of whether you're going to get sick or not or die is not your genetics, it's the expression of your genetics. Only 7% is hardwired. Biome changes every day. It's the major driver of how your body works. And your blood tests are your early indicator of imbalances in your system dynamics. So that's how simple it is. But that's not the way our healthcare system works today. Our healthcare system waits till it breaks and then goes back in and tries to figure out what happened.
Yeah, one of the things that got me very interested in this whole realm. So I spent a lot of my education abroad. We realized really quickly that we do a very poor job here of truly addressing like the root cause of pain. So I was in many different countries, and I spent quite a bit of time in Thailand, who spends 1/300th of the dollar that we spend on healthcare. And they have better lifespan, they have less chronic disease, and I was just like, look, they don't have access to many of these procedures and medication. Like, what are they doing? And when you looked at it, a visit with your doctor may have been like going back through, like, all right, let's kind of talk about how you lived over the last month. What are you eating? What are you doing? How's your relationship? Like, I sat in on visits that were just like that. And a lot of this is him like writing down a script that is just a life change. Like, oh, here's what you need to go do. And I was like, okay, that is backwards from the way that we do it. We give all the stuff, we do this here, let's do this thing, let's do that. That doesn't work. Okay, well, you actually need to go and do some changes in your life to get it. Those, our quick fixes didn't work. And so that kind of, opened this major window
Right.
of
And that's just,
how
it's,
these
it's a
people are
different
doing it
way.
for
And
cheaper.
yeah, and I'm glad you brought it up because, being a pain doctor, you'd say, wow, that's different. It isn't. It's all in system biology. And you also brought up another piece, which is, look, if I gave you the five things and two things in each category, the number one thing to your health, the number one, the force multiplier in the military, we call it force multiplier. When we had airborne fuelers, I could actually do a lot more stuff because it impacted everything I did logistically, right? A force multiplier of 10 times to anything you will do to your body is, do you have one dyadic relationship in your life, which is defined not as just having someone who's empathetic towards you, but compassionate, which psychologically is defined as they care about me and I believe that they by word or deed will take action if I'm in trouble. That is the number one impact on health, if you believe it. And if you don't believe that, then I'll show you the statistics. There's been 100 studies done on people who believe someone's praying for them, 25% increase in recovery from surgery. Placebo, if they believe their doctor knows them and cares about them, placebo effect is 60% more effective. The number one thing, the way humans are designed, is whether they believe there's compassion in what's happening, which is why in Thailand, when they sat down and talked to you, you feel a connection. It's a short-term dyadic relationship. Number two is overall connection to something bigger than individual relationship, right? Which humans are the only animal in the world that can imagine. So I can actually connect with you, not just because I'm the alpha, the beta, or we live in the same live in the same neighborhood. I can connect to you because I like you. And therefore you have an unlimited ability for kindness and love and to feel connected. People in book clubs live longer. Extreme Republicans live longer. Smokers in Italy, all the studies say if they socialize, they live longer because they overcome because it's a force multiplier. And the third is purpose. We cross tab almost every study done on longevity, even if we don't do the study. One of them was in Yugoslavia during the war. People lived 4 years longer. They lived 4 years longer, and then they all died. You go to the graveyard, they all died within 4 years at the end of the war because the grandparents were taking care of the grandkids when the kids were out fighting. And then when the kids took them back, they all died within 4 years. But they lived longer because they had purpose. And purpose doesn't have to be change the world. Purpose is what gets you up in the morning and you feel like, I want to get up out of bed. So the number one way to balance your system, whether it's your immune system or your pain, is to actually think about what you're doing mentally. The number one killer of Americans over 65 is loneliness. The number one cause of mental illness under 25 is loneliness, and it's curable. Loneliness is curable if you can connect, and it doesn't. You only have to have one dyadic relationship at a time. You need one person, right? So if you have more, that's great. But this isn't, we all think that, we're behind because we look at social media and it's just not. The average male in the United States today self-defines as having one friend, one really good friend. Now they define it in a different way than women. Women define it as they have 3 to 5.
Yeah.
That's why women tend to live longer, because there's a force multiplier on everything else they do. Because women in aging is, paradoxical. I mean, they're, they have systems like their fertility system that ages 4 times faster. So it is in how they connect
Right.
that impacts how their biology decides to live longer. So to me, that's the number one thing, is if you're not doing something every day to be self-aware and love yourself and think about, how you're connected to the world, none of the health things will save you.
Yeah, I love that. That's the stuff that doesn't get talked about enough. Certainly not in a healthcare sense. And I think part of it is because like it's not the sexy stuff. It's not the fun thing. It's like, you really need to put energy into this, and whatever energy you
Well,
put
sex
into it
is
is going to
actually
be
good.
much better.
Sex and intimacy is actually good. That's connection. But to
Yeah.
your point, it's soft. And the problem is we have very difficult time with soft things. One of those diet companies, I went in and I looked at it. We were doing really well. We had 10 places open, and and they wanted to add more doctors in because they were, this is it. We've got doctors. We have Stanford doctors. We're so smart. When we actually looked at it, the number one impact of people losing weight was that they had to go talk to an RN every week, and they liked them, and they liked the RN, and they wanted to make them proud, and that the RN cared about them. So we continually don't want to pay attention to how simple it is, right? Is that, and I know we're going to run out of time. I don't know if you want me to give you a couple of the hacks
Yeah, let's jump back to the. I'd like for you to drop at least a little bit on the kind of genetic testing that you would have people look at, and what are they looking for if they're trying to use that to make some decisions, and then let that kind of dive into a couple of the kind of tests that people might want to do, and maybe some changes
so
in their
look,
life.
there's a book that I just hired a guy named Lee Wood, who will win the Nobel Prize. He actually, with Venter, sequenced the genome, and he invented the machines that could sequence it, because we couldn't sequence it without that. And he started a company called Amgen, started 40 companies, one of the most famous people in the world. He wrote a book called Scientific Wellness, and it just came out last year. And almost every scientist and every doctor that knows anything about longevity has read this book. I'll give you the 4 P's of health span and longevity, right? One is predict and prevent. We have science today that can predict and prevent things before they happen. So to your point, you have to look at your genetics, you have to look at your biome, and you have to look at your blood work. Because if you combine those 3 things, so for instance, I can tell you, you go into your doctor and he says, your cholesterol's high. Why don't we put you on a statin? Again, back to capitalism, statins are the number one selling drug in the country today because they're cheap, and their efficacy is they tend not to cause harm, right? So the doctor says, I can do something for you today, put you on a statin. If you look at your genetics will tell you whether that statin will work. Some people, it can't, statins will not help them. Why waste your time on a statin if your genetics will tell you? And that's in every genetic test. There's 120 million anonymized genetic records today. We've been doing this for a while. Anyone who knows genetics, you take the genetic test, it's $250. If you have a counselor, they will give you a report, and they will say, here's the things that you're resistant to. And by the way, you can lower your cholesterol. It will show you in your genetics that the best thing for you to do is the lifestyle. Now, you may not like that because that means you got to go out and walk every day, but it's going to tell you the truth, right? I can also tell you, when you look at your biome test, I can tell you your biome is what's in your stomach and your mouth that eats everything. 20% of the drugs you take are eaten by the biome. They never even get to you. So I can tell you whether you're wasting your time taking a drug or whether you got to change to a different drug or you have to do a lifestyle intervention.
How do
So
people get access to that stuff? Because it's like right now,
it's very easy right now. The genetic test is about $250. There's a ton of commercial companies who will do it. The real trick is not getting access to the test. If you Google genetic test, if you Google biome test, you can get them.
yeah,
The
those are
real trick is
easy.
getting a doctor who will sit down with you and spend the time, because the average GP spends less than a half an hour with a patient.
Yeah,
Okay,
I would
and
say probably half my patients have had a genetic test, and no one has told them that stuff. No one has
right,
said like, "Here's what this means for your life."
right. You need about, I'm just going to tell you, average, if you don't take 2 hours and walk through a test with someone who knows what they're doing, it's not going to, what it will tell you is it'll tell you the really big red flags. This is hardwired in your 7% that you're probably going to get pancreatic cancer, right? You can get very quickly because it will show you. But what it doesn't show is what you have to do when you bring a patient in. Okay, you're getting pain there. Let me look it over there. Let me see what else you've been doing. What you have to see is the way that they're combined. So you have to pay someone is basically the answer, or you have to do a lot of research yourself. But if you take a genetic test and you don't spend a bunch of time researching it or talking to someone, then it's a waste of time. And a biome test is the same thing, right? This is a system biology kind of thing. But those tests aren't expensive. It's not the cost of the test. It's the cost of the getting help interpreting the
Yeah,
test.
the interpretation is where the power of those things are. Let's kind of bring this to a wrap. There's so much we could do this for hours and hours. You talked about some of the like simple changes that people could make that improves longevity. Give us maybe like your most unexpected three or four.
Sure. So I'm going to give you the ones that are the most unexpected and the easiest and have the most impact in the four categories. Look, number one, it's relationship. And by the way, we all have to have a relationship with ourselves. And my wife's a psychotherapist, and I believe, right? But that's hard, and we're going to work on this, for the rest of our lives. I'm 61. I'm still freaking. The worst thing about self-awareness is at the end of the day, it's always your fault, too. No matter who did something to you, it's the way you reacted to it. So it sucks.
Right.
But you got to keep doing it. So let's look at the other four categories that are in that. If you're doing something about yourself and your relationships, what are the four categories, and what are the one or two things you could do that you'd say, really? Okay. So number one is you have a machine. You're putting stuff in your machine. Okay. How do you know what's good for your machine? Well, people tell you that unprocessed food and vegetables are good. Absolutely correct. Unprocessed food, vegetables, and reduced calorie restriction. We all know that. So let's try to eat less. Intermittent fasting is an easy way. You don't get full autophagy. You don't drive yourself into ketosis. But if you skip one meal a day, you will have less calories because you won't have as much time to eat because you're only going to eat two meals. Okay. So you really should be skipping dinner. But if you skip dinner, you don't hang out with people. Remember, now you don't have connection. So most of the time we tell you to skip. Just drink a cup of coffee and don't eat before 11 o'clock. You get two benefits. One is a shorter eating window. And the second, your body gets used to it after about 2 weeks. The second is that your body has more time to digest the food because you're not putting more food into it. So it breaks down things better and it doesn't turn it into simple sugars. Okay. So intermittent fasting, right? Number one. Number two is that get a CGM. There are those little things they give diabetics. Why do diabetics have CGM? Because you can make money off them because they're dying. So we invented a thing that actually looks at your blood chemistry and tells you when you're eating foods that are bad for you because they're spiking your insulin. You can now get a CGM that tells you I'm allergic to strawberries. When I eat strawberries, it spikes my insulin. It's better for me to eat rice than it is for me to. So how can I tell you what diet to be on unless you've done a CGM for 15 days and you track what spikes your insulin?
Yeah.
So intermittent fast, eat vegetables and unprocessed food, and get a CGM. Now, what I will tell you about it is that there's a lot of commercial ones now. You can get them on Facebook because people have now figured out that longevity is big business. So they're now taking the exact same CGM they sold to diabetics and they're giving it to you. The second is how does your machine move every day? Exercise is not the answer. The same way dieting isn't the answer. We don't need exercise. In fact, if you look at it, we don't like exercise because we have been trying to save calories for 2,000 years. So that's why when you're doing the same workout every day, you don't burn as many calories. Your body's getting more efficient. So in exercise, the number one thing to do in exercise is move 15 minutes every hour. It's more important than 2 hours of working out. Because what happens when you sit, which is why they call sitting is the new cigarette, when you sit for a full hour, these toxins sit in your joints and your organs. Your body is designed to have slight movement so your blood moves the toxins around and disperses them. So if you told me, could I work out an hour or work 5 hours and sit and then work out for an hour or move every 15 minutes, you will get 4 times the benefit of standing up every 15 minutes and walking around as you will getting exercise, right? The second thing in exercise is, yes, is FIT good, high intensity? Yes, because humans, and especially in the US, don't get enough high and they don't get enough low. So, but how much FIT do you think you need a day? What do you think for high intensity workout? There's a lot of hype about it. What do you think?
15 minutes,
10 minutes.
10
10
minutes.
minutes of FIT and 10 minutes of sitting in the dark, not even meditating, 10 rebalance your hormones.
Yeah.
They go up, then and they don't have to do it at the same time. You can do them different times of the day, but
Right.
every day your body is a machine. It just wants to know it's moving and it's got high intensity mode and it's got low intensity mode. Everything's okay. Done. That's
That's
easy,
good.
right?
That's good.
Then you go into maintenance. There's two types of maintenance. One is sleep and the other is touch, right? So if you look at sleep, the number one thing about sleep is, everyone says it's the number of hours. It isn't. It's what time you go to bed. Because when the maintenance crew comes into the factory, if they know what time you're coming to bed, they're 20% more effective. So if 5 days a week you go to bed at the same time, you get 20% more hours sleep. So it's going to bed at the same time for at least 5 days and then getting more hours. And then the final one is the exosome. You have 3 ways that you pull in chemicals into your machine that off balance your system's biology. One is, you all know it. You're in air pollution, you live less. You smoke, you live less. Okay, so we all know our lungs. The biggest organ in our body is our skin, and we're absorbing things through our skin. So the biggest detriment to your health is when you in your washing machine. If you don't use organic washer, the chemicals in that do scent and stuff like that go directly into your skin and unbalance your system biology. And dryer sheets are pure poison because they don't even make clothes softer. They put lotion on them so they slide across your skin and it absorbs in. 91,000 chemicals in the US and less than 0.5% were ever tested for absorption over time and how they impact your system biology. So, yes, they are stamped by the US government as safe. They're not good for you. If they were good for you, nature would have lotions that you would rub every time you walk by a plant. So what I'm telling you, and dishwashing liquid, same thing, goes in your mouth and it's on you. So there's 8 things I can tell you right now. Intermittent fasting with a varied diet, calorie restriction. Um, Use a CGM to find out what foods you're allergic to or your biome. Then in movement, 15 minutes a day, 10 minutes of FIT, 10 minutes of LIT. In maintenance, go to bed at the same time and try to get as many hours as you can. 7 to 8 is probably right. The most important is figuring your chronotype. There's 3 human chronotypes. It will tell you when you're supposed to go to bed because most of your deep sleep, which is body repair, happens in the first 2 hours you're asleep. And if your chronotype is that you have to go to bed at 8 o'clock, you're going to miss them if you go to bed at 11. So you will not get deep sleep. And REM always comes at the tail end. So if you're chronotype, if you're waking up too early, you don't get mental improvement. So those are 8 simple ways to actually, with less than 15 minutes or half an hour a day, that you could add 10 healthy years to your life. And I will guarantee you, this is one of my buddies, the palliative care doctor, he sits with people when they're dying. Okay. And they would pay anything for 1 more year of healthy life. Okay. So 10 things, write them down, half an hour a day.
I love it, Blair. Thank you. I know where you gotta run. Where can people find you? Where can they chat with you more if they have questions? They want to keep up with what you're doing in some of these spaces and learn more about you and everything that you're involved with.
Sure. You can get me on LinkedIn. And, if you'd like to, I do a lot of speaking and I'm happy to invite you from video to listen in. And if you have something that I haven't talked about that you think would be interesting, write me a note. I'm always interested in learning. and figuring out how it works so that we can get the information out there. But thank
I
you
love it.
for the time.
Yeah, thank you. You're a wealth of knowledge. I know we didn't even tap half of the stuff that we were kicking around to start with. So
I know I
uh,
talk too much, but I got eight
I love
brothers and
it.
sisters, so I got to talk.
No, great stuff, man. I appreciate it. Thank you, Blair.
All right, thanks. Take care.